The Wildlings are a group of savages from beyond the wall, and they live far away from most civilization. That's why it went past where they are in terms of culture, in terms of technology, and in most things in their society. Now there's a bit of confusion around their name. They will refer to themselves as free folk, because that's kind of a nice way to talk to them. That's like the politically correct way, if they have a politically correct way. I don't think they do, but the free folk is a nice way to call them, and that's what they'll call themselves. That's kind of the way you're supposed to call them in their eyes, because they are free. Oppression from the Iron Throne, and they have no kings. Although they do have the king beyond the wall, he's not necessarily a king because of blood. He is a king who is chosen, so they have this sort of democracy going on in the Wildlings, and he's themselves made it their mission think they have a better life
to the south and take back their rightful home. They've kind of united under this one banner, and nearly all 90 of them actually became not friends, but they're a means to an end in each other's eyes. So they'll use each other until they get to the other side of the wall, and then maybe they'll betray each other, maybe they'll actually live in harmony, but it's not really known right now. Now, although the Wildlings are seen as more savage than the people in the south side of the wall, they themselves are more diverse in culture, and as a whole there are more kind of different types of Wildling, and it seems like the closer you are to the wall, the more cultured you're going to be. I'm not sure if that's like an intentional thing, but it certainly seems that way. So I think like Craster, he doesn't kill the Night's Watch on sight, he has a deal with them so he can earn money. So in a way he has kind of a more smart outlook on life, and if you were to go right into the lands of winter, then you would see the kind of savage people who would just kill everybody on sight, and some who might not even speak the native Westerosi language. They may have made up their own language, or they may not even speak the language. They may have went like kind of back in time and have kind of barbarian grunts. Now, just like there is a slur for the free folk, the Wildling terminology, there is a terminology for the people who are across the wall from them, and they call them the kneelers, because they kneel below a king who is not chosen for them. So they have to have a king because of blood, whereas people beyond the wall actually choose their king. And that's one of the kind of main things that they emphasise on, that they are free because they choose a lot of things in their society, and if they don't like someone, they'll either kick them out or kill them. The free folk view the kneelers as kind of lacking freedom, whereas the kneelers view the Wildlings as lawless, primitive killers. So each person has a different view on the other, but in a way, each person's view has merit. Now, I've talked about the Night's Watch before in a video, and the video I did for the Night's Watch was pretty short. They were pretty easy to kind of talk about. You had the Night's Watch member who fell in love with a Walker woman, and you have most of the Night's Watch actually joining the Wildlings, because they're kind of so far away from their lands. They go so far towards the lands of Always Winter that they kind of lose sight of what is right in terms of what they're meant to do in terms of their vows, and they might actually join the Wildlings. And it's not an unusual thing, and many people from Night's Watch have actually joined the Wildlings, and that's why there is the king beyond the wall, and most kings that are in Wildling territory are indeed former crows. So that's something interesting to think about. I'm going to try not talking about some stuff that I talked about in the Night's Watch video, because when I talk about Night's Watch I kind of have to talk about Wildlings, although I'm going to go into a bit more detail about specific Wildling things. I'm not going to talk about the same things. But anyway, the Wildlings think that the gods made the world for all men to share, and when the kings came with their swords and with their crowns, they stole the land from not just the Wildlings but people in general, because kings have power, and that power is not something they deserve, and that's what they believe. They don't deserve it, so that's why they don't have any kings. The society of the Wildlings is made up of many different small tribes, and each small tribe may be different. So let's say one tribe is proficient in fishing, the other one is proficient in hunting snow lions, for example. So that's kind of differences they have. You can kind of compare it to African tribes in the way that they're kind of small, and they'll have their own specialisation due to where they're kind of situated. And like I said, some are more civilised than others, and they will have chieftains, and some small clans will just fight each other throughout and make no progress towards kind of harmony in their clan. I mean, you're always going to have different clans fighting, but when you're one clan, when the clan you're in is fighting each other, that can cause real big problems in your prosperity and how the people of that certain clan will live. In terms of technology, they have done nothing to kind of better themselves in that aspect. They have no real idea about technology. They are harsh people who live in harsh lands. One small group of Wildlings who believe that they are cultured, and are indeed a little bit cultured,
are the Fen. Now these guys believe that they're the last of the first men, and they speak the old tongue because of this, so that kind of does back up their theory of them being old men. They speak a few words in common tongue, but because they're so far north, they don't really have any necessity to do so, and they kind of keep to themselves as a tribe as well. They are led by Magnar, and Magnar is Lord in Old Tongues. That kind of backfires on what they said. I'm not sure if the Chosen doesn't really say much about him. He's kind of an unknown character. He's not really talked about that much, but he's known as Lord in Old Tongue, and I imagine they did choose him. If they didn't, then it would be kind of hypocritical of them to put fun at the Southerners, as they call them. Another interesting thing is that Fen is the name of a vassal house in Skagos, so maybe his people got past the wall. Maybe they didn't. It's just an interesting thing. Maybe I'm being stupid thinking that because they both have the same name, they have some kind of connection. But anyway, Fen is considered a god among his people. They worship him, and according to Jon Snow, the Fen are more akin to the Southerners because they have laws and they have lords in their valley. They are vicious fighters when they put their mind to it, but because of their belief in Magnar, they hold back on a lot of those things because they feel like they have to repent once they do that, and they feel like there will be a punishment if they kill someone for no reason. So that's kind of one way they are cultured and akin to the South, because the South has the old gods, has R'hllor, new gods, so they have that kind of similarity between them as well. And because of Magnar, they are also disciplined by Magnar as well, so they have that kind of thing. He is almost the king. That's another similarity that you could draw between them as well. Another group of wildlings that could be seen as civilized is the people of Hard Home, and this is the closest thing to a city the wildlings have. It's on the peninsula near Shivering Sea, and it's where a lot of their maybe trading would go down, and a lot of the kind of main things that you would imagine they would do would also happen. But then on the other hand, you have cave dwellers who paint their faces blue and raid whoever they can, and that also includes their fellow wildling brethren, so they're kind of the least civilized of the wildlings. So you have kind of a big scope of civilized and non-civilized wildlings as a people. So many people think the wildlings are just savages, but they do also have this kind of civil side to them as well, if you do really kind of delve into their history and into their kind of way of thinking. And in my eyes, I think the wildlings are actually the better people, but that's just me. Because there's no king, and there's no kind of real leader apart from the leader that's chosen by the people, there are no laws. So you take what you can, you kill who you will, and there is no punishment because of that. And the Magnar people of Fen, are kind of excluded by that because they feel they're kind of god guy. But most of the people, wildlings as a whole, will just do what they can, do what they want, and have no kind of repercussions because of their actions. So I suppose that's a negative thing about their civilization. The free folk keep the ways of the first men, sort of like the Starks try to do with their religion. They speak the language of the first men as you get closer to the wall, but I would say there's many other kind of languages that aren't talked about that they would speak as well, because the kind of groups of wildlings, the tribes, are so far apart and so diverse. I would imagine that they have their own language as well. Now, contrary to popular belief, the wildlings don't actually hate the Northmen as much as you would think. They raid because they hate the crows. Now, in their eyes, the crows are the gatekeepers. The crows are the people who are keeping them from getting to their rightful home, the place that they were once at, and the place that they were driven from. They want to just go home, and that's one of the main things they say. That is their rightful place, and the people who are there weren't always there. They were invaders from early Westerosi history who came in, invaded, and forced the people who were inhabitants, the first men. They forced the first men up north until they were stuck, and then built a wall. So as your Grit says, and this isn't a spoiler by any means, she says all that the people did who live in the south is just come over, steal the land, and build a wall there. Nothing else. They don't have any right to the land that's there. And that's one reason that someone might support them, and that's one reason that I do support them as a civilization, and that's one reason I'm rooting for them later on in the books. Now, the free folk hate the crows very much, but if the crows break their vows, they will save them. And that is one thing that can be shown via the many kings who rule over the wildlings, who are indeed past crows. They may have been like separated from the group, nearly dying, and then the wildlings would say, we'll give you this drink, we'll give you this food, if you say you will join us. And in that situation, most people would actually join them and want to live. So you couldn't really blame someone for joining them, but you could blame someone for being their king if it goes against all that he stood for throughout his life. However, sometimes the two groups, the wildlings and the Night's Watch, actually have to work together, For example, as I just said, some Night's Watch members might get lost, and the occasional Wildling who is kind, a rare thing, a kind Wildling, he would help them and bring them back to the wall, and vice versa. If a Wildling child was found, the Night's Watch would bring them up as a Night's Watch member. So they both have kind of a good side to them, and they can both have a slight bit of empathy towards each other. In keeping with the spirit of independence, women are seen as equals in terms of battles. Now in the south, you would never see a woman taking part in battle. It would be a very weird thing. But in the north, where the Wildlings are, there are spear wives, who are just like female warriors. And they are just as bit as brave and as fierce as the male counterparts in their raiding parties and in their armies. And because the Wildling people are so fierce, the men are expected to be fierce in the way they kind of betroth themselves to a woman, going so far as to steal them from a kind of rival clan, take them home and force them to wed. But the woman is expected to fight all the way through and not really give in, so both of them are kind of fighting each other. So one guy's fighting to marry her and she's fighting not to marry him, so it's kind of a weird way to do it, and it's a long process and a very strenuous one as well. Now one thing they have, which is a rather strange rule, although an understandable one, is that you can steal daughters, but you can't steal existing wives. So if a man has a wife, you can't steal her, but you can steal the daughter away from that clan. I'm not sure if that's just manners or something, but it's something that exists, and I'm not entirely sure why it exists. Now in the sky, there is a constellation that the Wildlings refer to as the Moon Maid, and in that constellation there is the Red Wanderer, and when that's present, it's a good time to steal a wife from a rival clan. So that's probably the time they're going to do it, and that's the time when most kind of fighting and most rivalry really does take place. And from a southern point of view, it might be seen as strange, but in its essence, it's seen as a way for a man to show his strength to the woman that he's about to steal, but also to rival clans. So it's a way to say that kind of we're fortified, we can survive if you attack us, and we're not going to take much shit from you. So it's a weird way to do it, but it's also a kind of, it makes sense in a lot of ways as well. Another thing about the Wildling kind of civilization that really emphasises how harsh their way of living is that you're not supposed to name your child until they're 2 years old, and that's because a lot of children die at a young age, and that's below the age of 2. So once they're 2, you kind of have a guarantee they're going to live because they can fend for themselves in a lot of ways. But many people wouldn't name the child anything before it's 2 for fear it dies, and if you name something, you have more of a kind of emotional attachment to it, and if your child dies, you'll be more upset about it. And although the Southerners think that the Wildlings are barbaric and kind of old civilization, they don't wed their brothers, their cousins, or their sisters, and they think that the gods will frown upon them if they do so. So they have the Targaryens and Lannisters in that respect, and they're kind of more ahead of the times as well in that way. Now raiding is another big part of the civilization of the Wildlings, and there's 2 ways that they raid the south. They will either climb the wall and do it that way, although that was seen as the more dangerous way, although the more quicker way as well, or they will go across the Bay of Seals in little rowboats and go that way, and that will take a very long time indeed, and the results, because you're on the rowboat, won't be as much as you would expect. And many favour the boats because it's safer, and when you climb the wall, a lot of people die on the way up the wall anyway, so you lose a lot of the men and a lot of the firepower you would have with you before. Now when the wall was first built, it meant that the Wildlings had no way to get across, but as the Night's Watch has kind of weakened, the Wildlings have got stronger, and they've managed to get further and further towards civilization in the south, and that's something that worries a lot of people in the south and also worries the Night's Watch. So they'll try and get more rangers for their kind of cause, but it's not going to happen, and then the Wildlings get further and further. Now the Wildlings don't really take any gold or anything like that, they have no use for that, they trade like amenities like food and drink. They will steal fur, they will steal women, and they will steal most things they can get their hand on, but only things that are of use to them in terms of survival, because that's the main thing they care about is surviving. They don't really care about much else in their civilizations. The free folk do not mine, they do not smelt. It will be a very big rarity to find anyone who smelts armour for you, a very big rarity to find blacksmiths or anything like that. They usually make their own armour, and they usually make it quite badly. They usually loot from dead rangers and get their armour that way, so they have no need to make armour. The Ferns, however, the people I mentioned before, they're more well armoured because they're more civilised, so they may actually make their own armour, and they may actually make weapons and stuff like that. The horses they use are strong, they're sure-footed, but they are indeed scarce, because when you go so far north, The wind, the snow, the kind of environment itself is so harsh that horses don't really survive at all. And the houses you live in wouldn't really fit a horse, and it kind of isn't suitable for a man or woman, never mind a animal, which is why they don't keep pets or companions as well. Mance Rader also got the support of giants to help them, although they're not really counted among the ranks of the Wildlings, because they are not, in fact, humans, the giants, obviously. But people don't really know that the giants are real, never mind that they're associated with the Wildlings. So if the Wildlings do make it across the wall, not going to say if they do or not, but if they did, then people who met giants would probably be very surprised to see them.